This is now being recorded and everything, so you guys are good to go. You'll get this entire deck and the minutes and everything like that, so no worries there. But it's just something that we were super excited to announce, and we're so glad that we were able to work together to get this done. Eddie, did you have anything to add to that at all?
Just, yes, we're very happy and look forward to seeing many of you at the events coming up. Also, it's going to be a busy 2 days. We have a pretty heavy agenda, and so thanks for being here. I know we have several members of chapter boards on other than chapter presidents, so thank you for including some of your other board members as well. We're only better as we all work together, and as we all know, 2 years, 23 months almost, it has been a crazy time, and we'll be talking more about finding ways to keep that momentum going, but this is a great start for the day, I think. That's it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so happy to share this great news with you all. Another couple people from AFSA staff I'd like to introduce, because I know that they're on the call. Our Senior Director of Membership, Christina Salou, is on this call, as well as our Vice President of Finance, Elizabeth Henry, is also on the call. In addition to regional directors, myself, they are just two of the members of AFSA staff who work tirelessly to help support not only travel advisors everywhere, but specifically you all as chapter leadership. And we are so excited that we're able to have this meeting today. Great. So moving right along into the content of this meeting, speaking of support, I would like to go over what I like to call the chapter support system. The chapter support system really is what helps our chapters run. And there are several aspects to the support system, and I would like to go over that and the communication expectations for each of those aspects. So our chapter support system is as follows. We have our chapter presidents and their officers, your regional directors, your CPC chair, your chapter liaison, and of course our senior director of membership. So this also represents the levels of which communication should occur if you need to escalate any sort of problems. It also represents the different aspects that you have to reach out to if you're having difficulties. For example, a chapter president and officers, you have your regional directors. Your regional directors should truly be your first stop if you have something going on. Always reach out to your regional director. If you as a chapter officer or chapter president do not know who your current regional director is, please let me know and I will make sure that you are connected to them. Regional directors, in turn, have their CPC chairperson, who they have a direct connect to. The CPC chairperson is Eddie Woodham, and he serves in that role on the board and also as the longest-standing regional director on the board. And he is another person that you can go to after going to your regional director if you have questions, comments, or concerns. Then you have me. I'm your chapter liaison. I'm your headquarters contact for chapters, for regional directors, and for your CPC chair. And then last but certainly not least, we have our senior director of membership. If there is an issue or something that needs to be solved, or if you have a problem, Christina, as our senior director of membership, is really our kind of last stop when we are trying to solve issues. Her experience in association membership management makes her the perfect person to help us if we are trying to solve a problem, create something new, or just going throughout our day-to-day. But this order of communications will help make sure you get the accurate help that you need in the quickest way. So let me go over some communication expectations for each one of these segments of the chapter support system. So first, we have our chapter presidents and officers. You're expected to communicate regularly with your members and with each other. A simple conversation can often solve many disputes. You also need to make sure you're communicating regularly with your regional director. Make sure your regional director is aware of your meetings. CC them on communications to your chapter liaison, me, and AFSA headquarters. Also, make sure you are responding to communications from your regional director. I cannot emphasize that enough. You will notice that the layers of contact, all that is all those layers do is help to protect you and make sure that you are getting the responses that you need. For example, I often get busy. I will just admit that. And I might miss an email or 2 or 10. If you are CCing your regional director when you're emailing me or other people at AFSA headquarters, then your regional director can also say, hey, Jasmine, I think you might have missed that email. This became particularly important when we talked about the chapter report cards, because the regional directors had the first view at the report cards. They looked at them and they let me know that I had missed some meeting minutes and different things like that. So it's important that you're CCing them on your communications with myself and at the headquarters. Also, I know all of your regional directors have reached out to you at least once, and if not multiple times throughout these last few months, especially as the chapter report cards came out. It is imperative that you communicate with your regional director. One of the qualifications for being a regional director is that you must have been a chapter president. So not only are they a wealth of knowledge, but they've been in your shoes before. So they can help you solve problems or talk through issues, and they can do so in a way that comes from experience. I personally have never been a chapter president, so I don't have that experience, but they do. So when you reach out to them, they're expected to reach back out to you, but communication is a two-way street. Next on this, we have our regional directors. They're expected to communicate regularly with the chapter presidents, reach out to check on them, which I know they do, hold meetings with chapter presidents one-on-one and as a region, and respond to communications from chapter presidents. They are also expected to communicate regularly with me, which they do through a monthly meeting that I have with them. During that monthly meeting, the regional directors talk about what's going on with their region. They bring problems to the group that we can solve together. And then we come up with amazing ideas like the chapter leadership benefits package. That came out of regular communication between myself and the regional directors. That was the result.
Jasmine, while we're talking about
Yes.
while we're speaking about the regional directors, I mentioned the board regional directors, but let's also mention our 3 other regional directors. Lois House from the Northeast. I see Lois is on the call. Mike Weingart from South Central. Mike, I see you as well. And Layla Dada from the Southwest. And I know Layla is on too. All 6 of us together form your regional director team.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eddie. All right. So speaking of Eddie, your chapter president's council chair is expected to communicate regularly with the regional directors and assist them and chapter presidents with any chapter issues as they arise. They also represent chapter needs to AFSA's national board. And let me tell you, Eddie is a force to be reckoned with in board meetings. I've seen him in action. He also responds to communications from chapter officers, chapter presidents, and regional directors. Oh, gray baby elephants, ... For those of you who are watching the recording, this is one of 3 parts to a phrase that you will need to let me know, show me that you actually watched the entirety of this recording. So, first part of the phrase is gray baby elephants. Moving on, the chapter liaison, that's me. My expectations are to communicate regularly with the CPC Council Chair, the regional directors, and chapter presidents. I'm to provide training, resources, and headquarters level support for chapter presidents, and also follow up on requests made to AFSA staff from chapter leadership. I cannot stress the importance of CCing me when you email other members of AFSA staff. Quite frankly, things get busy, but it is my job to be your liaison, and I cannot do that if I have no idea what's going on. So if you CC me on an email, say to accounting, what I do is I then flag that email for follow-up 48 hours later. If I don't see that an email has been followed up on, I follow up and say, hey, did you see an email from so-and-so? That's my job as your liaison, and I'm happy to do it, but I can't do it if I'm not informed. So please, when you are emailing AFSA headquarters, make sure that myself and your regional director are copied on those emails. That way, we can advocate for you. Our Senior Director of Membership, Christina Salou, her communication expectations are to communicate the membership goals and expectations of the chapter. As the visionary for our department, she sets these goals and sets how chapters should play into those goals. She's also there to help chapters finalize membership for supplier partners. I know a few of you have passed supplier partners on to Christina to help facilitate the official supplier membership with Asset, and we thank you for doing so. She is also the, for lack of a better word, final word on chapter issues. Christina is the head of our department and my boss, and as such, if we have a chapter issue or things that we need to solve, she is the one who needs to help us solve that if it comes to that level. So I want to go ahead and pause here and see if anyone has any questions before moving on. And I'm looking briefly at the chat. Does everyone know who their regional director is? I hope so. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Yay, Eddie. Eddie got a shout out in the chat. One last thing I would like to add before I move on to the next segment about what makes an A is I will be sending a survey out to all of the chapter presidents to talk a little bit more about communication. Like I said, communication is a two-way street. So we want to make sure that you are being communicated with and you feel like you have the support that you need. So look out for that survey when the meeting minutes and meeting recording for this meeting comes out. And someone asked, where do supplier members show up in Magnet Mail? That's a really great question. I'm going to be doing a breakout session on Real Magnet tomorrow. But to quickly answer the question, the suppliers show up in your supplier_other members list in Real Magnet. So you have 4 lists, and that's one of them, and so that's where your supplier partners will be. All right, moving on to our next session, it's called What Makes an A? So we came out with the chapter report cards, and this has been a learning journey for all of us, myself included. And so I would like to talk a little bit more about the chapter requirements specifically and what it takes to get an A with those chapter requirements. All right, so all chapter executive board positions are filled and maintained. To get an A in this area, you need to have a vice president, secretary, or president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. The vice president and secretary positions may be held by the same person, and all board members must be active travel advisor members of AFTA. This includes any officer positions not listed above. So first you need to have a full set of officers. That's the first part of getting an A here. The next part of getting an A here is sending a list of officers to your regional director and myself. I know many of you have officer boards and you have great volunteers who serve with you, but you must send those lists in to us so that we can recognize that. What I also do is I take those lists and I put them in our database. So if you haven't done this, please make sure you do so as soon as possible. Also, you want to submit any changes to your chapter board as soon as they occur. So when I'm looking to assign A's in this category, I want to make sure you have all the officer positions filled, you've sent a recent list to your regional director, and you have submitted any changes if they have happened. Any questions here? All right. One thing I would like to emphasize here is that anybody who is listed as an officer or holds an officer position must be an active travel advisor member. We do have wonderful supplier partners who are happy to support us, and we are glad to have them. Unfortunately, the way that our bylaws are written, they cannot serve as a chapter officer. An appropriate place for these wonderful supporters is as a chairperson or other type, other type position within the chapter. So they can lead a committee of sorts, they can be members of the committee, but they cannot serve as officers. If you've already sent this once, you do not need to send it again. but I would make sure that the members who you have sent in to your regional director are still current members of ASTA, because I will be going to look back to make sure that everyone's lists are updated and everyone is current. All right. Sending monthly newsletters to chapter members using the preferred emailing system to the list provided in Real Magnet. So to get an A in this area, you need to log into your chapter's Real Magnet account to receive your list. I can see who has logged in and when was the last time they logged in. You should be logging in at least once a month. So making sure that you do that. Make sure your chapter liaison and your regional director are CC'd on communications with your chapter. There's a reason why there is this and. We want to make sure you're communicating with your chapter at least once a month. I can almost guarantee you I'm probably going to miss a newsletter because I'm human. If you are CCing your regional director and they look at your report card and they see that I missed a newsletter, they will let me know. Likewise, if I see that they have missed something, I will let them know. All this does is to make sure that you are covered when we are looking at these guidelines. So it is beneficial to you to make sure you are following all of these steps. I saw a question in the chat. It says, Jasmine, can a VP also head up the membership position holding these two roles? Absolutely, they can. And oftentimes your vice president will serve maybe as a vice president of membership and thus can head up the membership chair position if they so choose. Any questions about Real Magnet, specifically logging into Real Magnet? Yes, the RDs and myself are included in the chapters group. Now, if you are sending your messages through Real Magnet, then you don't have to worry about adding RDs. If you are sending it through some outside system, like a MailChimp or something like that, you want to make sure that you're adding the RDs and myself. Another thing I would like to point out is I know some chapters are using an assistant of sorts outside of the chapter to help them to send out their meeting notices. Make sure that person, whether they're using your chapter's Real Magnet, if they're using your chapter's Real Magnet account, there's no issue. If they're using something else beside your chapter's Real Magnet account, then make sure that you know that they are logging in to get your list. Whether you're sending me a note about it, or you are telling them directly to send me a note. I know some of you are using an assistant. It says, I've never gotten into Real Magnet. Make sure you attend my breakout session tomorrow, and I will help you make sure you get in. Other questions about Real Magnet? Keeping in mind, I'm going to have a whole breakout session on this tomorrow. All right. So membership retention. Really, we want you to retain a sufficient percentage of the chapter's existing membership as reasonably determined by ASTA. What we're looking at here, because I don't want this to scare anyone, is we're literally looking at patterns. So if we see that, your chapter membership is slowly trending up, probably due to your efforts reaching out, that's fine. If we see that it's trending down or that you're losing members, we're going to actually reach out to you and say, hey, we can see that you've lost a significant amount of members in this case, since the first of the year. How can we help? So to receive an A in this area, you either have a positive trend overall for the past maybe few months, or you're directly working with ASTA headquarters to address any retention concerns. From time to time, we've worked with chapters who they have another group in the area that is, taking ASTA membership, and we look for ways to support them in building ASTA work. We will work on that on a case-by-case basis. All we ask is that you work with us. How often are you tracking retention? Every month. I check retention numbers every month on the first of the month. And, a drop-off here and there, you're staying pretty steady or you're growing. Most chapters have either grown exponentially or still growing. none have really had any major membership drop-off. So with that being said, I would say you guys are doing really well in this area, and we just ask that you keep it up. But if you feel like you're losing members, please just go ahead and reach out to your regional directors, myself or Christina, so that we can get ahead of the problem before you may notice it in the numbers. Let's see. So, a minimum of 4 meetings in a 12-month period posted on ASTA's industry calendar. I'm going to go over specifically how you post meetings on an industry calendar. But I'm going to ask in this session that to get an A in this area, you need to post meetings to the ASTA's industry calendar using the process that I'm going to go over in the next session, at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting. And the reason why I say at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting is because currently I'm the one reviewing the tickets for postings to the industry calendar. However, that will not be the case forever, and we will probably have an IT director who is going to handle those tickets. You want to give them enough time to get your meeting posted. And of course, you want to have the meeting, and then you want to make sure you send meeting minutes or meeting notes to your regional director and your chapter liaison. There are 3 parts to getting an A in this area. You need to post your meetings to ASTA's industry calendar at least 2 weeks prior to the meeting occurring. You need to have your actual meeting, and then you need to send your meeting minutes to your regional director and your chapter liaison. Of all of the areas where we were graded, this was the one where our grades were the lowest. What we found was that one of the 3 items were happening. We were either posting meetings and then not sending minutes, we were posting and having meetings, or we were having meetings and sending minutes but not posting them. I cannot emphasize the importance of actually posting your meetings to ASTA's industry calendar. The reason why is because ASTA's industry calendar is open to the public. That is, members who are thinking about joining ASTA but are not yet a part of your list, members who have lapsed, suppliers who are looking to engage with ASTA chapters, and so on. Posting to the industry calendar ensures that all of these groups see your meetings. I know many of you have Facebook groups that you use to communicate to your chapter members, and I think that is amazing. But that does not replace posting your meetings to the industry calendar. Furthermore, you want to make sure that you are sending your meeting minutes. Even if your meeting was on the industry calendar, or myself or a regional director was in attendance at your meeting, you want to make sure you follow up with those meeting minutes. I absolutely enjoy attending every single one of your meetings that I can, but especially due to a lot of them being virtual, I attend so many that I cannot possibly remember what happened 3 months later. So in order to receive credit, full credit, and get an A in this area, you need to post meetings to the industry calendar, have your meeting, and then send the meeting minutes for at least 4 meetings a year. All right, I will get into meeting format and inclusions in my next session, which will cover posting meeting minutes, since that was a place where we needed a little bit of help. So I'm going to go through a couple of questions that I've received in the chat. So for those of you who do have Facebook groups, I would still ask that you maybe duplicate what you're doing in Facebook with your real magnet list. And here's why. Your real magnet list is dynamically tied to ASTA's database. I know there are some, hiccups with real magnet from time to time, but for the most part, your newest members are going to end up in real magnet before they end up in any Facebook group. And so I would say at least communicate regularly to encourage them to join your Facebook group. But there might be someone who joined yesterday who is a member of ASTA, but has not had a chance to join your Facebook group. So you want to make sure that they are being communicated with. Real Magnet does say when members are joined, and I will actually go over that during my breakout session tomorrow. When you pull the report, it does say join date. If you're using an SMS text to communicate with members, that is wonderful. But I would also encourage you to continue to use Real Magnet just in case you don't have everybody's phone number. Meeting minutes, chapter meeting minutes do not need to go to Peter Labasso. It is just your board meeting minutes, which I will go over next. And as far as a format for meeting minutes, I will go over that. Because most of our members have told me they see our email marketing for events versus Facebook events. Thank you for sharing. Oh, so this is the second part of a three-part series. So if you're watching this recording, the baby elephants that I was talking about earlier are fun and continuing on. All right, so you also must have a minimum of 4 executive board meetings. This is asking you to meet with the members of your chapter board, which includes everybody who has an officer title. And then you want to send your meeting minutes to your regional director and your chapter liaison. Your regional director needs to be included on these minutes. And I will take the time and forward them over to Peter Labasso, who ultimately gets a copy of these minutes, or you can forward them to him yourself. And as far as format goes, for chapter meeting minutes, I will introduce a new format that you are going to be welcome to use. But specifically for your chapter board meeting minutes, they need to be in Word or PDF form. So your chapter is having 2 types of meetings. The first is a meeting of your entire chapter body. Anytime your entire chapter gets together, be it coffee, be it tea, be it a happy hour with lots of, adult drinks, that is considered a chapter meeting, and you should send meeting minutes in whatever format is most convenient for you. The other type of meeting is your chapter board meeting, which is all of your officers meeting to plan for the benefit of your chapter as a whole. These meeting minutes need to be in Word or PDF form so that they can be filed away for our nonprofit, et cetera, status, and other legal reasons. Oh, I gave you the phrase again. All right. So, chapter requirements and guidelines. So the other one, ASTA headquarters or director of finance or ASTA designee must be assigned a chapter bank account. Elizabeth is going to go into details about chapter bank accounts later on today. But as far as your bank accounts are concerned, if you have a bank account, your ASTA headquarters must have a designee on that account, a signer on that account as well. That's going to either be Elizabeth or Peter. Some of you may have Peter or Greg, which is fine, but Elizabeth should be a designee on your account. As long as you have someone from ASTA headquarters on your account. I know some of you who have older chapter accounts might have Greg or Peter, and that's okay. You don't need to change them, but you do need to make sure that you have someone from ASTA headquarters on the account. And to receive an A, just have someone on your bank account. If you don't currently have a bank account or you're working on it, this is not something that is added into your GPA because it's not applicable to your grade. The other thing is provide ASTA headquarters and your regional directors with copies of your mid-year and year-end financial reports. To get an A in this area, you just need to turn in your financial package by the requested date. April 1st is the date that has been requested by accounting to turn in your year-end packet. Please do not wait until April 1st. Some of you have turned in your financial packets already, and you are to be congratulated. Thank you so much for turning in those early. For those of you who have not, or you may have questions, please attend Elizabeth's breakout session tomorrow. If you have questions throughout, please make sure that you are emailing Elizabeth with a CC to me and your regional directors so that we can assist you. Turning in these financial packets on time is essential for us to make sure that we are filing the correct tax items with the IRS. So it is important to ask this nonprofit status that these are turned in on time. Mid-year packets are usually typically due in June, but I will let you know within plenty of time what exact date the accounting team would like you to turn that in. All right, and this last one. The chapter president is to attend a minimum of 50% of the CPC meetings and CPC calls to include regional calls. The remaining 50% can be attended by a chapter board executive, an officer, but not a committee chair. So what this looks like, first and foremost, if you're thinking about this holistically, is at every single CPC meeting, your chapter should be represented for the entirety of that meeting. We want to make sure all of the chapters are there. And the reason why is because these are the meetings where we make decisions. And we want to make sure that your voice is in the room. We ask that the chapter president attend a minimum of half of those calls, and if they can't, then they should ask another officer or more than one officer to attend in their spot. But if you're a chapter president who's unable to attend at least 50% of the calls, like this one, or I know the Northwest region had 100% attendance on their regional call, then you need to let us know, because as chapter president, it is imperative that your voice be in the room at least most of the time. So I'm going to pause here and see if anyone has any questions about any of these requirements, because I want to make sure that we are clear on what it takes to get an A. My goal is that we are 4.0 chapter group. Everybody's getting A's across the board and everything. I say, why not shoot for the stars? And honestly, we actually did pretty well as a group. The next round of report cards will be coming out shortly. And as a group, we actually got a B. So we didn't do too bad. Can CPC emails include all executive board members since they are eligible to attend? Yes, they can, and that is my goal. This is part of the reason why it is important that you send those lists into your regional directors, because the ones who have, I've added them to a list. And from that list, I'm going to create a row magnet list that's going to allow stuff to be sent out to them starting in June. The financial packet information I sent out in an email, and I can't remember the last time I sent it out, but it has the most up-to-date, the email has the most up-to-date packet, as well as guidance for filling out your 1099 form, or I'm not sure if that was the right number, but for those of you who needed to turn that in. The form was due on January 31st, so it would have been prior to that. But that is the most up-to-date information. Any other questions? So one other thing about these is that we have these particular requirements. Oh, I'm sorry. Could something be developed that chapter leadership could check to make sure they've gotten the meetings that we sent? Absolutely. That's definitely something I can work on. And I do Monday musings, and the Monday musings will start to go out to all officers in June. The process, what I'm doing now is I'm actually working on making sure that I have all of the lists of all of the officers. That's part of the reason why we sent that. let's see where we are on time. All right, chapter meeting reporting. So I alluded to this a little bit, but I'm going to talk specifically about reporting your chapter meetings, because this was one area where, as a group, it showed that it was a little bit difficult for us. All right, so your meeting process. Post it, have it, send it. Post your meetings to the industry calendar, have your actual meetings, send your meeting minutes. So let's talk about each of those. Posting your meeting minutes. So, I'm sorry, your meetings to the industry calendar. Let's walk through post it. I will say, there is another link at the bottom of the industry calendar that looks like you can submit meeting minutes. Please never use that link. It does not go really anywhere, and it does not allow us to communicate with you. So this is the only process you should be using to post your meetings to the industry calendar. First, you're going to go to this website. You all are going to get these slides as well as just a PDF breakdown of this so that you can refer to it when needed. So you're going to go to this website, and it is going to open. It's going to say, welcome to the Ask the Help Desk. This is the same ticketing help desk that Ask the Staff uses to put in IT tickets. You all are being given access to it because that's how important you feel your meetings are. So the first thing it's going to do is ask you to log in to submit tickets. You just need to put your email where it says work email and then click log in. It is going to prompt an email to be sent to you, and it's going to look like this. And then it's going to ask you to click this link to log into the portal. Now, as it says, the above invitation link is valid for only a short period of time, so please log in quickly. When the link opens, so you want to make sure that pop-up blockers are off so that the link will actually open, you're going to click in the upper right-hand corner, submit a ticket. Then you want to fill in the necessary information and click submit. So let's pause here. You will notice that for those of you who use the previous system, this one doesn't have all those drop downs or anything that you have to fill out. So that's a good thing, but the problem with that is you also want to make sure you're including all of the information. So in the summary part, the part that is up here, you want to make sure you're putting your chapter's name. And then in the description, you want to make sure you're putting the date, time, location, a short description, and a contact person. So let's look closer at this aspect of it specifically. So you have your date, time, location, cost, short description, your contact person. So you can obviously list it this way if you want colons, but a more inviting invitation looks sort of like this. Please join the Asset Headquarters chapter on date February 9th, 2022 at time 5 p.m. for chapter happy hour. We will be hosted by Amazing Bar and Grill location located at 123 Washington Street, Alexandria, Virginia 22314. This event is free to current ASTA members and $10 for non-members. There's a cost. During this meeting, we will learn more about ASTA's amazing advocacy wins and have a chance to network, with local members. The RSVP, contact jobs and causing at. So I took this information and I made this sort of inviting invitation. You can also include a Zoom link in this. You can include an Evite link or any sort of other sign-up link if you would like. You always still want to include a contact person, even if you include those links in your posting, because sometimes they don't work and people would like to contact someone to ask additional questions. And I'm emphasizing this because it is very difficult for whoever is doing the tickets to post your meeting if you do not have all of this information available. It looks nicer if you can post your information in this form. So just asking them to join you, date and time, and so on. You can modify this as you wish, but you should use something similar to this to portray the information. All right. Last but certainly not least, if something is missing, you're going to get an email from the ASTA Web Ticket Help Desk, and you can see the email right here, and it will say something like, please add additional information, or they'll ask you clarifying questions. Please be on, especially if you don't see that your meeting has been posted, please be on the lookout for these emails, because this is going to be how our IT department is going to work with you to get the information we need for your particular meeting. Or, as sometimes is the case, if your meeting link is broken, if we tried to click on it and it went somewhere else, we will use this ticketing system to communicate with you. Likewise, once you receive this ticket, you can use this ticketing system to communicate with our IT department. For example, maybe you need to change the time of your meeting. Maybe a meeting has moved to a different location. Maybe you need to cancel the meeting and it needs to be taken down off of the website. This is how you're going to communicate about that exact same meeting. So what I would do, once you receive confirmation from our system, I would just go ahead and flag that email just in case you have to do some communication with our IT department about the particular email. What that does is it makes it very clear which meeting you're talking about, and that's very important. I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions. All right, seeing none. All right, having it and sending it. Having it, you all have meetings and they're fabulous. So no need to belabor that point. Now sending it. When it comes to sending chapter meeting minutes, and I'm emphasizing chapter meetings, not board meetings, but chapter meetings. You need to send an email to your regional director and me, basically answering these questions. When was your meeting? Who was in attendance? And what business took place? So your meeting is like, we had a meeting January 1st to celebrate the new year. We had about 100 attendees. I know that's not a real number. Our sponsor, Mexico, took care of everything. Just a summary of what's going on. Anything else that's important. If you want to do formal Robert's Rules of Order meeting minutes for your meetings, then you are most welcome to do that, and I will most certainly read them. But you do not have to do that. A quick note and an email for your chapter meeting minutes will suffice. The other thing that will come out with the minutes from this meeting is a meeting minutes form. So those 3 questions, plus a couple of more clarifying questions, like your name and what chapter are you from, I've actually turned it into a Google form, and you guys will have the link to that. So you can either send me a physical email, or you can send me a Google form or submit this through the Google form. And the reason why I did that is so that it is easier for you all to submit your meeting minutes. Now, if you submit them through the Google form, I will make sure that your regional director also gets a copy of that. And I believe I saw a question in the chat. Yes. Each meeting should have a separate ticket posted to the industry calendar. Since I work very closely with you all, I can, for the most part, interpret what's going on with your meeting minutes. But like I said earlier, I will not be the one to process these tickets for much longer. So I want to make sure that we're all set up for success when we are posting our meetings and we're having them and we're sending our meeting minutes. Since it looks like we're doing pretty well on time, let me double check before I say that. I would also like to go ahead and show you the process. Yes, I do. Because we have a little bit of time, so that'd be great. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you a couple of things that I think are going to be very helpful for you. 1 second. Yes, most of this information on the forms, et cetera, is on the ASTA.org /CPC page. There are a couple of updates that I need to make, and I'm going to make them very shortly, which is I'm going to add a new video about the ticketing process that I'm about to go over right now, because it has changed ever so slightly. And then I'm also going to add this PowerPoint that's going to help you get through that as well. So no worries there, but the information is available. You're welcome. Thanks so much for your question. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second and then share it again. Because I want to show you the process that this, what it goes through, so you can kind of see what it looks like. And I also want to show you the form that you should not be using, because it really doesn't go anywhere. So I'm going to go ahead, and you all are seeing my screen. We're going to go to ASTA.org. And on ASTA.org, we're going to go to the industry calendar. And you'll notice that the chapters have a special color. It's kind of a salmon color, I would say. And you can view the calendar as a list. I'm going to go ahead and log in as a member. But before I log in as a member, please note, I'm not logged in. I'm not as a member as the system would recognize me, and yet I can see this entire industry calendar, which just speaks to the importance of posting specifically to this industry calendar. So let me go ahead and log in as a member now. All right, this form right here, I cannot emphasize it enough that you never use this form ever, 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 because it does not do what you need it to do. I know it's here and that can be confusing. It's for other things, not for chapter meetings. I'm not quite sure where it goes anymore, to be completely honest, but you want to make sure that even though this is here, this is not for our use, so we're not going to use this form. I just want to make that explicitly clear. Close up. All right. So then, great. I told you what not to do, but let's go over what to do. Yes, Marine, you know what? I completely understand. This seems like a lot to be done, especially since you're full-time travel advisor working 40+ hours a week. I completely understand that. And this is why I want to emphasize going back to one of the first things that we went over, which is how to get an A in an area of having, chapter officers. So, with that being said, you want to make sure that you have a full officer board, and it's not just a chapter president or relying solely on one or two people to do these things. For example, this is not something the chapter president necessarily should be doing. I personally would think this job would go to a chapter secretary or a chapter communications chair. Yes, and I know some chapters have a paid-in administrator that does do some of this, which is also helpful. I would say reach out to your chapters. Oh, I like it. Some chapters have an events chair, chapter secretary to post the meeting and notes out meetings. I know this is a little bit of a deviation from where we were before, but I would like to say that part of the reason why we emphasize the need to have a full chapter board, including chapter chair people and chapter committees, is so that the travel advisors, all of you who are working 40+ hours a week, do not feel like you have to do this all by yourself. Absolutely, Eddie, the president cannot do it all. It is not possible. If I were president of a chapter, I know that I could not do it all. Sorry for the little bit of the soapbox, but it's designed that way. We want to make sure that we are getting as many opportunities out as possible, and we also want to make sure that you also support it. Christina's breakout session is going to talk about retaining and engaging good chapter leadership and chapter officers. So if you're needing help with that or you want some tips on that, definitely attend her breakout session tomorrow. And so by request, I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat that you should be using. and I'm going to use that link myself. Give me a second to drop that in the chat for you. So there's, oh, I'm sorry, I sent it directly to someone. Let me send it to everyone. There we go. So this is the link you should be using. It'll be included in the kind of after action items that come out. So I'm going to go to that link. I can show you guys what it looks like. So we're going to log into SpiceWorks, and I'm going to put in the chapters email. Chapters at ASTA.org has its own email that I use for different stuff, sort of like this. And then I'm going to go ahead and click login. And it says a login link was emailed to chapters at ASTA.org. And I hope that's the right email. I'm pretty sure it is. And so what it's going to do is it's going to send me an email, which I'm going to pull up in just a second. While it's pulling up, just a couple of other things. By the way, the chapters has a Gmail as well as a YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen some of our YouTube videos, let me know and I'll make sure to share those with you. So now I'm going in my inbox and I'm just looking for that email to come through from, there we go. And so you see you have this log in to the help desk portal email. Let me show you all. And it's exactly like the one I showed you in the clip. And you're just going to click this link to log into the portal. And so when you click the link, you want to make sure that pop-up blockers are off so that you get this link to pop up. And then you're going to click submit a ticket. And like I said, you want to make sure that you are putting your chapter theme. So I'm just going to put HQ chapter. And in the description, I'm going to put all the items listed before. List of items, such as date, time, location, all of that. You'll notice that you can attach a file here. This is not something typically you would use unless you want to. But we don't have a way to show attached files as far as I know right now, so you don't have to worry about that. And then once you've listed everything, you can then click submit. And they'll say your ticket has been submitted. A technician will reply to you shortly via email. So what will happen is the ticket from here goes and it gets assigned to someone or somebody takes the assignment. The system will send you an email, and that email will say your ticket was submitted, and then once that ticket is submitted, it'll say your ticket was assigned to, right now you're probably seeing me because I'm the one working through some of the tickets, or Michelle, who's also helping with some of the tickets right now. Go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Any questions about that process? Okay, hold on. Yes. This is on the initial connection is on the ASTA Chapter President's Council page, and that's www.cpc/www.asta.org/CPC. Sonora says we're in the process of adding a newsletter and membership chairperson to handle two things for the board and to meet the headquarters requirements. That's amazing. Do that, because then you're getting more people involved with the leadership of your chapter, and you're also lessening the amount of volunteer hours for everyone. So spread the wealth around. I happily encourage that. So how long after a ticket is submitted will it take for the information to be posted? That honestly is going to depend on the busyness of the person posting it. But it shouldn't take any more than a week, I would say. But the reason why I encourage you to post it 2 weeks plus in advance is just in case they run into something, then you have allowed that amount of time. I've seen some tickets come in the day before, and unfortunately, those are really hard to get to. Once we have a new director of IT who's going to be joining us, I will ask them what we can expect as far as the turnaround time. Yeah, Nona says she has a membership chair and an event planning committee, but I like the idea of having a newsletter chair. I think that's amazing. Some people love to write and live to write newsletters. I'm not one of those people, but there might be someone out there in your chapter who likes to do that sort of thing. And so with that, you want to make sure you're providing those opportunities for people to serve. Yes, I will be sending out the recordings, a outline breakdown, and all of the slides of everything that has been discussed after all of those materials have been put together. And I know I've seen people taking screenshots and everything like that, and that is wonderful, but know that I will be sending out all of this. These are all really great questions. Thanks for putting them in the chat. All right, so going back to the body of our meeting, I don't want to leave this topic if anyone has any questions. So does anyone have any questions about posting meeting minutes, where to find the link, what format they should be in, anything of that sort? All right, perfect. All right, so I wanted to give some time to this particular panel. So these are our trade show panelists. I'm going to let them talk a little bit about what type of trade show they had and what that looked like. I have questions that are planned for them, and then I would ask that everybody who has questions for them, go ahead and put those questions in the chat, and I will try to take things as well. The reason why why I and the regional directors asked these particular panelists is because they each hosted a different type of trade show that you can consider hosting depending on your particular area, what's going on with COVID in your area, and different things like that. That, and then I would like to say, that trade stars are a great way for a chapter to connect with supplier partners, connect supplier partners to AFTA. There's also a great way for chapters to earn money for themselves. And so I'm going to ask everyone on the panel, we're going to start with Eddie and then Denise and then Deb and then Shelley, to introduce yourself full title and everything, and then the type of trade show that you have. So we're going to start with Eddie and then Denise, then Deb, then Shelley. Go ahead, Eddie.
All right, so Eddie Woodham, president of the South Florida chapter. We have had hotel events, trade shows the last several years. Obviously, our last one was scheduled in March of 20. I think we were 14 days away from it when the world came to a halt. So we posted and we pivoted. I've started deciding I might as well accept these words: pivot, unprecedented, unparalleled, because they're not going away. Linda, Philippi, I'm talking to you right now. So at any rate, we pivoted and we moved that event 6 times. We slid it in June of last year, right before the Delta variant took over South Florida. We had about 150 advisors there. We were at a Hilton property, about 60 suppliers. It was a full day event. We pulled off having buffet lunch, which was served by the hotel staff so that no one had to touch the utensils, things like that. It was a challenge. Probably 2 weeks later, that event would not have happened. It was that challenging. That just as a side note, the skies opened up that day. Jasmine was there, and we'll remember this like a horror movie. And the hotel sustained some serious damage to their roof, and the water poured in right on top of our AV master control board. So, you know, it was definitely trial by fire, but Jasmine jumped into action and helped save the day. So anyway, we'll talk more, but yeah, and we're planning another one, May. We're already on board with another one at that same property in May, and people are ready to get back together, and hopefully things will continue to move in a downward trend with Omicron and all the other challenges of the pandemic. So that's my quick story right now.
Thanks, Eddie. So Eddie really hosted your traditional trade show, if you will. So next we have Denise. Denise, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the type of trade show you hosted?
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Denise, as everyone knows. I am the Delaware Valley Chapter President, which I cover 3 states, Pennsylvania, Southern New Jersey, and the state of Delaware. So that's why it's called the Delaware Valley Chapter. Well, as Eddie said, the world opened up for all of us and we had to improvise. We had set a trade show for Delaware because we looked at, there was no activity in Delaware itself. So we said, well, we're going to hold our trade show in Delaware. We negotiated, had everything ready to go. And again, the world opened up with a pandemic, and that was June of 2020. So we had to figure out how we're going to get our suppliers the avenue to be able to not only see members, but members see the suppliers. So we went to an all virtual trade show, and it was over a 2-day period. So how we arranged it was that those members that are paid, we broke it up by our guest speaker. So if you paid for the amount to be our guest speaker, you had the opportunity to speak both on, I think it was a Wednesday and a Thursday, or a Wednesday and a Thursday. So you had the opportunity to speak on both days, and everyone else just had speakers on one day. So we had about, I think it may be about 20 suppliers, give or take. I can't remember right now since 2020 is long gone and out my memory. So we broke it up that the guest speaker spoke, and then we had giveaways by the speakers. And each speaker had the opportunity to present for about 5 minutes. And they were happy with it because they not only got their money's worth, but they also had the opportunity to present before members. Make a long story short, they gave giveaways. We had a break in between. We had some very nice discussions with suppliers. And that's the long short of it. But it was a 2-day. Jasmine helped orchestrate it with us. She monitored, she was our MC, which we were very excited because I couldn't have done it. So it was very wealthy for us. It was very what's the word I'm looking for? It was very informative for the members, and we had a good turnout for a 2-day virtual trade show. And we're looking maybe to do it again down the road.
Awesome. We're going to get through the introductions, and then I'll get to some of the questions in the chat. So next we have Deb. Deb, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and the type of trade show that you guys had.
Hi, Deb Belshak, Mid-Michigan Chapter President and North Central Regional Director. We did an outdoor venue in July. It's our Christmas in July event. Normally it's held in a memorial museum instead of the traditional hotel, their ballroom, but we had to keep rolling it over, and we held it last July. It was the first big event in Michigan, held outside under an event tent. Waterfront, which can have a lot of other issues if you're outside, but it's a combination of a fundraiser for Astapac, a give back to the community, our travel supplier trade show. We had about 57 advisors and 25 suppliers this year, which was good because a lot of them still weren't back to holding events, and they were just excited to get back out in front of everybody.
That's wonderful. So thank you, Deb. And last but certainly not least, we have Shelly. Shelly, can you introduce yourself and the type of trade show that you had? Oh, you're muted, love.
All right. I'm Shelly Phillips. I'm the president of the Alabama chapter. We had a little bit of a non-traditional trade show. We had it in a venue that is used for weddings, mostly. It's an old, like Southern plantation looking home. It also had a very large outdoor area that the vendors wanted to use mostly instead of the indoor spaces. For weddings, it would hold 700 or 800 people. So it was very large. We were able to spread out. We had daytime presentations starting at noon with box lunches delivered, sandwich boxes. Then we had the next speaker for an hour. They got desserts passed out. By 3 o'clock, we had a presentation, wine and cheese, and then in between another presentation, and then we started dinner and the trade show. So we had 29 suppliers and about 70 agents attend.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So as you can see, there's a variety of ways that you can host a trade show. Our representatives have hosted trade shows in hotels, virtually, outside, and in your non-traditional wedding type venue. And I had the pleasure of attending Shelly's trade show, and I can tell you, that venue, not a hotel, but it was gorgeous, absolutely lovely. So starting with Denise and then working our way around to Deb, then Shelly, then Eddie, what was one advantage of your particular trade show venue?
The advantage was we were able to get even more members because as I said, we cover 3 states. So by covering the 3 states, we didn't have to worry about those who lived in the western half of our state not being able to attend, or those who lived closer to the North Jersey chapter not being able to attend.
Awesome. Deb, same question.
No.
Since it was outside under an event tent, there was everybody could spread out. So nobody was enclosed. Everybody was at a distance. Most people, I want to say 50-50, were wearing masks. As you know, Michigan was one of the last states. They were really locked down in our requirements. They were just lifting restrictions. Everything was at 50% capacity normal. So by having it outside, there was a lot more space. And I think everybody enjoyed that. They felt a lot more comfortable than being inside of an event.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Shelly, can you tell us an advantage of your particular venue?
Sure. I think that people wanted to attend because of the location. Probably half of the advisors had been to a wedding there. It's one of those that's always booked a year and a half out, but if you have something on a Monday, then they're happy to get your business. So I tried to pick a day. I know most people love Tuesdays and Thursdays, but if you go with a different day, they'll even give you a better rate. So I think that worked to our advantage. Please don't hold me responsible for the way my state has treated COVID. We took it seriously in our trade show. We asked everybody to wear masks, except when they were eating and drinking. And if they were eating and drinking, to please go outside because there was enough space for everyone.
Absolutely. And Eddie, can you tell us an advantage of your particular venue?
Well, we had already made the arrangement to have it at the Hilton Doubletree Deerfield Beach, which is suburb of Fort Lauderdale, located between Boca and Fort Lauderdale. They were very flexible, so that was definitely an advantage. They rolled with me for 15 months. That particular property had comped all of our meeting space. So that was certainly an advantage. And I didn't look at other options as far as moving to one of these other type venues. We talked briefly about putting a big tent out in their back parking lot, but we opted ultimately to go with inside space. They have tons of meeting space, and we were able to safely hold it as we did. Like I said, it was during that time, if you go back to think about May, June last year, when we were all so excited that we were all vaccinated, and we thought we had this armor shield around us. So everybody felt really good about it. Although, like I said, a week or two later, Delta reared its ugly head, and things started happening. But the advantage was it was a hotel that was very flexible to work with me.
Absolutely. It sounds like you were definitely able to utilize your relationship with that hotel in order to get the best for your chapter. So with advantages, sometimes we have some disadvantages. So to flip that question on its head, starting with Deb, then going to Shelley, Eddie, and then Denise, what was a disadvantage of your particular venue?
The biggest disadvantage at the time is we had a lot of bad weather. So it was waterfront. They had flooding the week before. I mean, bad enough that houses in the area had backed up sewage, everything in their basements. The day before our event, it poured and we had our fingers crossed, hoping that it would not rain the day of the event. We did still have some of the ground area. I mean, ours was a tent over a cement slab because they hold weddings there. But if you got in certain areas lower around it was soft from the rains the day before. That would have been the only biggest advantage we had, is you had to count on the weather to be decent. And it turned out beautiful that day, and the weather temperature was great too.
Oh, well, it's definitely understandable for an outdoor venue. Shelley, what would you say may have been one disadvantage for your particular trade show venue?
So while the suppliers were setting up for the trade show portion, since they didn't get there for later in the afternoon, advisors felt like they could just homie on up to them and start talking to them. They really started participating before the trade show started. I think next time I would have to have some other kind of boundary to maybe just keep everyone inside and all the others outside, or vice versa. So that was a little sketchy, and thanks to you, all of our AV problems were solved. So
No problem. I'm going to go ahead to Eddie with the same question. You're muted.
Oh my gosh, you know, it's a webinar when you hear you're muted. I think there's a common thread here that it's important to have Jasmine at your event if possible, either virtually like Denise did, or with Shelley and me both having her. She is a great resource and whatnot. So disadvantage of the hotel. Well, you know, it was a hotel. And at that point, you know, people had not really done that yet. So I think we fielded a lot of questions as we led up to that date, like, was it really going to happen? And we had started that registration back in January of 20. And we filled up with like 150 advisors that were there, and then they hung on for 15 months. We didn't promote refunds too much. I had a few that had issues, and we did do some refunding. But ultimately, when the time came around, we didn't do a lot of more promoting because we weren't sure about how many people we could safely accommodate there. And as a result, our attendance took a little bit of a hit. Because people had maybe left the industry during those 15, 18 months. So, you know, it was not necessarily because of the hotel, but because of the timing and everything. So that's another thing in dealing with hotels. You have to probably commit to a certain minimum in F&B, food and beverage. So those are just things to keep in mind as you go down that road.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And same question to Denise.
The disadvantage was this would have been the very first full outright trade show that the Delaware members would have had, and the surrounding counties with which it was, because we have Chester County, we have Delaware County, even though Delaware as a whole is a state, we have Philadelphia County. So they would, and we have some New Jerseys, which it was right across the bridge. They would not have been able, they were not able to attend. And the advisors in Delaware were truly looking forward to the event. So that was the disadvantage, that they did not and could not have an in-person trade show. That was the
And I definitely understand that. I had the pleasure of also working with Denise on their trade show, and it was really, truly, I think, the definition of the word pivot, because we got together, you know, her board got together with me, we brainstormed like how we're going to make this happen, come you know what, or high water, we're going to make this happen. And guess what, we did. I mean, it turned out to be a virtual trade show. I'm going to actually start with Shelley on this question. If someone were to host the type of trade show that you did, what would you say is their very first step in planning?
Well, try to find a venue that's not used at that time. So if you have a restaurant, a very large restaurant, obviously, that only opens for dinner, maybe you could have a daytime event. That, I mean, we did some looking around, and then have it on a non-traditional day and make it affordable, but also make enough money to sustain you to carry out your ASTA duties for the year.
Absolutely. Denise, same question. If someone wanted to host a virtual trade show, what would you say would be their very first step?
Whew. Oh, wow. It happens. Oh my goodness. The very first step is, one, don't panic, because that's what we were. We were in a full panic. The second step I would say is notify the suppliers that is definitely going to be virtual. And then from there, make sure that when you talk to your, or when you introduce it to your membership, let them know as well. But I think the key is to let the suppliers know and have a format, draw up a design format, whether it's going to be one day, for example, ours was 2, the time of day, draw a diagram, work with Jasmine or anyone in that, ask the leadership to say, hey, this is what our plan is, this is what we're thinking. Have your board throw their ideas around, just so that you won't be doing it alone as chapter president, but you have not only your board, but you have the backing of ASTA, because as Eddie said, and most of us on this right here are saying, if you don't have a Jasmine or a Christina or someone from that board working with you, you will truly not be able to understand what's going on. So do yourself a diagram, come up with a scheduling, and see if that works for your suppliers as well.
Awesome. Deb, same question. Hosting a large outdoor event, what would you say is the first step for chapter 1 to do something like that?
Well, we secured the venue. We do it a daytime event outside, like Shelley said, because you get a better rate. We also asked if they participate with a nonprofit. You usually get a discount for that. We also told them we do it as a fundraiser, so they give you a discount for that because they know you're trying to bring in money. We also looked at the fact it was going to be outside, and we were all watching Zoom. We had no video presentations at this one whatsoever this time. It was strictly a mic speaking presentation with the suppliers doing a 2-minute podium presentation. So it cut down a lot of expenses, and it made it a lot easier to connect with suppliers.
Awesome. And to Eddie, and then we'll have our final question. After Eddie, we'll have our final question from me, and then I see a bunch of wonderful questions in the chat. I promise we will get to those. But to Eddie, hosting a more traditional, if you will, hotel trade show, what is the very first step if a chapter wants to take that step and do that?
Well, first off, we've been doing it a long time. The original ASTA South Florida chapter had been holding those for a long time, but I would think that maybe the first step would be to make sure you have buy-in from your board, first off, and also to make sure that there's interest in doing it, because it's not to be taken lightly. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of coordination. There's a lot of moving parts to it. So the first step is to maybe sit down, come up with a game plan. And then in our case, we typically rely on one of our supplier partner advisors who's on the board with us, Caitlin Etchevers. Many of you know Caitlin. She is with the Greater Fort Lauderdale CBB. She helps me look at possible venues, and then we start the process from there.
Wonderful, thank you. So the last question from me to the panelists before we get to some of the questions from the audience. And this time we're gonna go ahead and start with Deb. If you were planning to host the same type of trade show again, what would you do differently?
Well, right now, we're not even looking at doing it outside right now because of the weather situation. They actually also informed us they were not going to do it because it was such a sketchy thing with the weather. So that's all been changed. We will still look at a venue similar to that, maybe we could do inside and outside, but always have that backup to be inside. This particular event, we normally would be able to do that, but they decided to redo their showroom, their ballroom, make it larger during COVID. So it wasn't available as a backup plan. So I would make sure you have an indoor backup plan to put in place for weather.
Absolutely. And Denise, if you were to host another virtual trade show, what would you do differently?
I would say maybe start it earlier than what we did. Maybe give the suppliers a little more time to fully present, as if they did an excellent job. But I think we will give them a little more time, maybe start the event a little earlier than the time we had. But for the most part, putting it together I think if I had to do it again, I would do it again. That's what I would say. I would do it again. I would just make sure our scheduling, and as someone pointed out, that the platform we had the right platform to do it on as well.
Awesome. Shelley, same question. Hosting maybe even that same venue or a similar venue that's kind of used for other purposes, what would you do differently?
We would definitely start in the morning, and we would have morning breakout sessions, because we ended up with suppliers who figured out they wanted 30 minutes or an hour, and they pay an extra premium price for that. And not only would we have learned more about each supplier's offerings, we would have made a great deal more money.
Absolutely. And Eddie, before we get to questions from the audience, I know you will be hosting another hotel trade show. So what are you thinking about doing differently this year?
Well, we started earlier. We started really at that event in June. I spoke to the hotel the day or two before. We picked some dates in May. South Florida is very busy, and the demand has been pent up for a while. And so we picked 2 days, because we do a supplier reception the night before to thank them for their participation. So we started earlier. And I noticed Kelly Bergen, our vice president, mentioned that suppliers do need lead time to get on in the budget. So the earlier you start, the better chance you're going to have of getting people to pay those premium amounts. And I see lots of questions about cost. And, cost is so dependent upon where you are in the country, how much the going rate is. I start out my events talking to the hotels with this idea that we are not a traditional revenue producing group, that we are partners with them, that it's a win-win for them to have the exposure, for our advisors to come in, that the suppliers that are coming in might have training sessions at their hotel. So you really have to find a way to frame it. And so anyway, getting off a little target here, but at any rate, we'd start earlier, which we did, and we're trying to tweak our agenda a little bit. You don't want to turn away money, but yet you want to make sure you're giving meaningful content. So that's always a challenge.
Yes, that is amazing. And I want to actually speak a little bit to the point that you raised very briefly, Eddie, is when you are, for lack of a better word, marketing yourself as a chapter, let them know what organization you're a chapter of and what that means, that you're going to be bringing in travel advisors who can then sell their property. So they're seeing it, they're also learning and different things like that. And that does help when you're trying to do some of these negotiations. So let's go ahead. I'm going to jump into the chat and try to get some of these questions answered. So I know this question was for Denise. I've seen a couple actually come in about how many people were in attendance at your event. And I think there's another one further down is, did most everyone show up for day one as they did day two?
I'm going to answer the last question first. The answer is yes. And are you talking in continent about the suppliers and or members, or are you talking about members only? So the suppliers, let me see. think we had 20, 25 suppliers. I can't remember because we divided it evenly for both days. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jasmine. And I said maybe about 30 members, but we have more members than that. But I think we had a good about 30. And
I would say about 30. From what I remember, it was about 30 on average across all of the time.
Yes.
It started high. There was like, you know, a depth, and it kind of did an up and down. But I would say you had consistently about 30 people. And the platform that I used with them was GoToMeeting, which actually measures engagement. And so it was 30 people who weren't looking at other stuff. They were very, very engaged, which was really good. I'm sorry, I'm going back through the chat, making sure I'm getting everyone. All right. And I guess this is to you all, also to other chapters. Do you guys have, I'm seeing a lot of questions about lists or sponsorship menus or anything like that. Do you guys keep a sponsorship menu list, or you kind of go based on your relationship with the sponsor? I don't know. Like, Eddie, do you have like a sponsorship kind of level breakdown or anything like that?
Well, there's a lot of questions within those questions. I think, you know, we keep notes. Obviously, we have notes going back to when we started this with what was the NACTA chapter back in 19 and so whatnot. So I go back and look at the notes. I also, now that we're using the same hotel a second time, I've been to them to talk about what some of the food items work that we used, and we're going to pare that down a little bit because a lot of food was left on the table, if you will, and, you know, we're paying for that in advance. So, you know, you live and learn from your events. So, you know, I'm trying to create a checklist. I think that maybe is part of what the question may be, and it's a work in progress. And I noticed that someone from the Great Lakes chapter mentioned that they had one and it was posted on the president's page. I haven't seen that, but you know, that is part of what we all try to do, which is share information. So I think maybe that is something that we should all work on to try to create this so that we don't have to create the wheel every time we're getting ready to do one of these, because it can be, you know, mind-boggling, as Denise mentioned. Don't panic.
Yeah, I'm just scrolling through the questions, and there are a lot of really good comments in the chat about trade show. But I will ask this to the panel: how far in advance did you plan your show? Denise, you're the exception because I know we had to pivot right away. But you can talk about the original trade show that you had planned before we pivoted. So how far in advance did you guys start planning your trade show?
Well, the original one was planned, as Eddie said, and as Shelley and Deb said, well, about a year out.
Okay.
So you would start about a year out. And as Eddie said, the one thing is the suppliers need time also to find out their budget. So if you have talked with the hotel or venue, wherever you are, and you find out, okay, it's going to cost us this much to supply. And I'm asking my colleagues, if I'm wrong, please correct me. You make your budget according to, and you charge the suppliers, just in case anyone wants to know, what is going to cost you. So you divide it. If you're having 10 suppliers, what is it going to cost the chapter to put out money? So if they can pay for the venue, then that's whatever you charge them, and it pays for the venue, then you're good. And if I'm wrong, please, colleagues, please let me know.
Yeah, I think about a year out, I don't know, I think about a year out seems to be a general consensus. I saw in the chat that someone said that suppliers need like 6 to 9 months at least to make sure, a minimum of 6 months notice, 9 months is better, Kelly said, to make sure that they can get on your schedule and different things like that. Yes. This question from Sonora Kelly. Were you able to, or did you invite non-ASTA advisors to your trade show? And did you have an ASTA membership table at your trade show? And I'm getting a lot of head nods. And because I know you all did. And honestly, that is where I have attended the most trade shows, is being the person sitting at that membership table to explain about ASTA. And myself, particularly as your chapter liaison, and other members of ASTA staff are always willing to do that. Let's see. Yep. And charge different. Lots of, yeah. Valerie Sim says, don't be discouraged about the long lead time. This year is different and folks are planning much closer in, so you could definitely do something this year if you wanted to, which is true. Let's see, a lot of people are asking questions about charging. And to Eddie's point earlier, it really is different for each area and each venue and what things we're going to. But I will say this, for your trade shows, all of you charge your suppliers something, yes?
Yes.
Okay. But where that lies will depend on your venue, your area, and different things like that.
And another good resource of suppliers is your destination, like Greater Fort Lauderdale. We actually have Greater Fort Lauderdale, Greater Miami, and Discover the Palm Beaches. All three of those counties happen to be very strong ASTA supplier partners, so I utilize them, and they bring in some of their partners to present. Sometimes it's an attraction. Many of you that have been to Fort Lauderdale know, for example, the Jungle Queen, which is a great way to visit the canals of the Venice of America, or something like Flamingo Gardens, which people don't know about because they're looking to work with advisors too, and they do pay commission. So utilize your destination friends wherever you may be, especially you that are in port cities, the Port Miami, Port Everglades, they both participate with our event. So, you know, the sky is the limit really in thinking about who your partner may be to help you make that event special.
Yeah, that's amazing. Go ahead, Deb.
And keep in mind, as Eddie said, some of your big supporters are your CVB boards. They've got the money, they want to get out at those shows, even if it's not just a normal supplier. They're the first ones asking to do a presentation.
Absolutely. There are several questions about surveys, like pre-surveys, post-surveys, interest surveys in the chat. It says Great Lakes also says out a survey after their events. They have different questions for supplier and travel advisors. Is this something that any of you on the panel have utilized, and what have you gained from it if you have?
Sure.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Thanks to Joanne at Great Lakes chapter, I utilized every single thing I think she shared with me. So I was very appreciative. We sort of cut and pasted our own information into it and the things we need. Lots of tips about how to conduct your trade show, the space you need. I mean, really, if you're starting from scratch, it's a really wonderful place to start. So we do that. We do send it out to the suppliers. I send out the attendee list of the suppliers afterwards, along with, you know, did you get a return on your investment? Is there anything you'd like for us to do for you next year? And then just a free form for them to put in whatever they want, and the same thing to our members.
Yeah. I know Mike asked, how do you charge advisors, or do you, I guess, how do you charge advisors to attend particularly a virtual trade show? And I don't remember if you charged advisors or not, to be so much sure if you did. Did you have time? Yes, there was a charge for advisors. So if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Well, we charged advisors about $10, and then we charged persons who weren't advisors a little more.
Okay, there you go. So enough that they're invested and have a little bit of skin in the game, but not so much that is prohibitive, because we want to make sure that people who have a link and say that they're showing up are going to show up. Looking through. Susan said, I love the fact that there were no video presentations at Deb's event. A much better experience for sure. I am absolutely certain. Carol says, does everyone meet at the event need to sign a waiver? That is a yes. I'm just going to put that as a blanket statement from headquarters. Peter's going to present on this a little bit tomorrow, but we are still at the point where we are requiring waivers for in-person events. I'm seeing more new questions. Yes, Denise said $10. Well, it was $10 for the virtual trade show, specifically, not virtual chapter events. It was just the virtual trade show specifically charged
For the
$10
members.
for the members, and then a little more for non-members. Mike suggested a survey about supplier rates and additions, et cetera. I agree, and I will definitely put something together to assist with that, so we can kind of get an idea of what we are doing across our network, and hopefully I'll have that information for you in June.
So
Yeah,
one
Kelly.
thing that we did since we picked our dates for the entire this year, hoping some of those things pan out, but when we sent that out to all of our suppliers, we basically said, if you will commit to 2, you get a discount of $150. If you'll commit to 3, $250 off the total. You don't have to pay it in advance. You just have to commit to registering for the event. So I think that was sort of our early bird, but also knowing they'll get on the calendar.
Absolutely. So asking suppliers to commit either early bird or to commit to multiple events, giving them a discount for doing so. I know a lot of you have personal relationships, but one question that was sent to me privately is, how are you finding your supplier partners? Like, what are some of the ways you're using? And I'm just going to pose that to the entire panel. Whoever would like to go first can just jump in.
We contact our normal supplier presentations, but what I found this past year, some of the BDMs who attend all of our events started asking other BDMs to join them. I mean, we get a lot that also drive from like the Illinois area. So they were carpooling 2 or 3 of them to come to the event. So that brought in new BDMs that we hadn't had at events before.
Well,
Awesome.
we have had a list of them from before. We get them from ASTA's naturally website, ASTA's supplier list, but I've also attended the North Jersey events, and a lot of the supplier partners were at their events who may not have been for my area, but they gave me the contact for my area, so I was able to connect with a lot of them that way.
Awesome. Kelly or Eddie?
Yeah, we've had a list for a long time. I do look at the ASTA supplier list. We also look at our host agency, my host agency list of supplier partners, and then look to see we already have a relationship with them. So it's sometimes not as hard of a sell if you already have that relationship with them. And because of so many cruise lines being down here, we're sometimes heavy on cruise lines. And of course, they're ready to get back out there and tell their story, whatever that story happens to be. And we're also seeing more river cruise companies locate to South Florida as well. So we do have a kind of a big group of suppliers that are right here. They don't have to they don't have to come down here because they're already here.
Awesome. Shelley, how did you find your supplier partners?
Well, since I'm newer, it's a little more difficult. Also, who I personally work with, which has made me sort of change my entire business model, to start using the people who are here so that I can get to know the BDMs that are local. Also, my board members are in different consortia. So we have a Virtuoso board member, we have a signature board member. So that sort of thing helps too. Then everybody sort of pitches in. I am not shy about asking other people, you know, I mean, I may message somebody and say, hey, who's your person for this? I mean, I may know the company by looking through the little ASTA. I mean, I literally took out my AGC booklet and just went down the list. I started with the best sponsors because I thought they had the most money and they supported ASTA the most. And then I just went from there.
Awesome. It's funny that you actually bring up AGC because Rick Artis said in the chat that he's found a number at AGC. And I know I'm excited to be attending the New Jersey Trade Show coming up. And I know that many of you make those contacts at AGC, and I think that's one place that is doing. Yeah, Wendy Denny said we find a lot at AGC as well. And really, that's the type of, that is the type of, what is the word? Networking, thank you. One of the networking that I'd love to see from chapter presidents. Like, and one thing, thanks to Eddie's suggestion that we're going to try to do better at Chapter Connections is allowing the suppliers to connect with the chapters directly without the hubbub, if you will, of trying to connect also at the trade show. So we're going to have a portion, hopefully, of Chapter Connections that's going to help suppliers connect with you all better. So be there, as you see. Yes, and Layla says she's been sharing information with the suppliers about their July event coming up. Yeah, and we need a list of all the trade shows. One thing I will say from a staff standpoint for chapter trade shows is that staff, we're on the road. And let us know what your needs are, and we can definitely try to get a staff member to your trade show. Personally, my, I guess, bread and butter, if you will, is technology, as at least Denise, Eddie, and Shelley can probably attest to, and I'm happy to help you put together slides, get anything going, and just really my job as your liaison is to make you all look good, and technology is one way to do that. But I know, like, when Christina travels, she's gone to back-to-back trade shows, I've gone to back-to-back trade shows, and we're willing and we love to do it. So make sure when you're posting to the industry calendar that you're also letting us know if you need an Ask the Member, if you would like a member of Ask the Staff, especially for those of you whose trade shows have an Ask the Booth. Yes, and Zane is attending NorCal's Ask the Crew trade show tomorrow. So that's awesome. And I would say if you're emailing a member of Ask the Staff, besides me, I would ask that you CC me on that email so that I can help facilitate whatever things you might need, as well as seeing your regional director. Any other questions for our panelists? Anything that you might have thought of that may help chapters who maybe never hosted a trade show kind of get started? I know the word trade show can be a little bit daunting, but it is possible.
One of the VTA courses, I forget what it's called, it may be planning a special event, I can't remember, but it's very helpful. If you, right there, it's almost worth the cost, and especially now that we're going to be discounting that 50% for presidents, I would say there's a great course within those 9 courses about how to manipulate and get through that process.
Absolutely. Any other panelists have any comments to that?
Another suggestion to start off, just to get started, is to have a smaller trade show. I know Virginia Peterson has done this and is finding it's working out better. Maybe have 4 or 5 suppliers there, and just so it's smaller venues. So you could have multiple smaller trade shows and still get the same effect down the road.
Absolutely. You can have a smaller trade show, 4 or 5. You can have 50 if you want. Oh, yes, you can. That was Jocelyn. Rick, sure. If you want to hop on. Rick asked to make a few comments.
A suggestion.
Hold on, let me find you. Wait.
Okay.
Well, I want to pin you so everybody can see you. I just have to find you.
Well, while you're trying to pin Rick,
there you are.
To let you know.
A suggestion is if you're near somebody else, go to their trade show and see what they're doing. A lot of the format of our trade show is a bit of a scaled down version of Arizona's Fiesta in the Desert. I have actually attended it twice. The first time was we actually had a CPC meeting there years ago during it. And our trade show in the Northeast, we've got so many chapters close together. Long Island, ASTA, Delaware Valley, and the SBN chapters on Long Island also have come to our show and helped out. Denise and Helen and Lois were our bulldogs at the door to keep people from getting in before they were supposed to, and made sure that they had their waiver signed. And, you know, we tend to help each other out. I've been to Long Island Astis trade shows. I've been to events that Denise has had, and, you know, fortunately in New Jersey, it's only 90 miles to Philadelphia for me. My cell phone was my dentist was calling. You know, and again, start small. We've outgrown 2 venues in the last 8 years. We started out with only 35 suppliers, and now I have to have a wait list because we had 67 in October, and I had to wait until we got into the venue because they were in a temporary tent. And now they start calling us, when is it going to be? And like I mentioned in the we only set on we had a tentative date of April the 6th, and I've sold 45 tables in a week and a half because they've been waiting for it. So, you know, it takes time to build it, but like I said, we outgrew 2 hotels. When we're at the Best Western right behind Joanne's office, we used all 5 of their public rooms for the last show that we had there before we moved to the catering hall. And I've got Anchorage coming down to do a pre-show seminar, and you know, it takes time, but like I said, we in our area, because we're close together, we help each other out and attend each other's events, and we learn from each other.
That's awesome.
So if you're up here, April the 6th, if you're up here.
As I was Jasmine, as I was going to say, pivoting on your question, by us having 3 states, we have to spread our events out to have a trade show or any type of event. So as Rick was saying, we're naturally going to do the North Jersey. That's a given, because as he said, we're only about 90 miles apart. It's a day up. We stay overnight and have a good time. But as I said, we're 3 states. So by me being 3 states, we tried to have an event in each state. For example, I cover the whole state of Pennsylvania. So I have the northwestern half of Pennsylvania, the central part of Pennsylvania, and the eastern part of Pennsylvania. So we're calling an event, which we're going to have on the 29th of next month, a 3 Rivers event, because it's surrounded by 3 rivers. So we're having a little event up that end. In May, we're having an event. We're doing a workshop in the central part of Pennsylvania, which is a 2-day event. And then in Delaware, we're looking to have something in June for those in Delaware, since we couldn't have our big show, but we are doing either a trunk show or a bowling get together. And then we're also trying to look at, for the New Jersey part, we're looking at to partner with the North Jersey chapter and some of our other chapters to do something at Great Adventure. So we are working together to make it work for all of the chapters in our area, but also because I have 3 states as opposed to just 1, to have little small events, as Deb said, and Shelley said, in each of the areas.
Absolutely. I think that really speaks to what this network is all about, what the chapter network is all about. And I know it's a little bit easier in the Northeast because of the density, but there are chapter presidents on here who, not just our panelists, but others who have hosted fabulous trade shows. And so if you have questions, please reach out to your peers and let us know, let headquarters know, make sure it's posted on the industry calendar, post in our Facebook group. We have a non-business Facebook group. We also have our CPC Facebook group if you're having a trade show, so that people who are around or who might just be passing through can go ahead and attend and support you. Ultimately, this network is about supporting each other and supporting the ASTA members. So I think those are perfect ways to make sure that we're all getting the most out of these trade shows and attending each other's trade shows. Eddie, did you have something to add to that?
Just it reminds me of the January meeting that we had virtually. I put it on the CPC page and a few others, and quite a few of you joined. We have a new supplier partner. You'll know the name, I'm sure, Margaritaville at Sea. Now, Margaritaville, you don't think of them as at sea, but they have just merged and taken over what was Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line. And they've made a very generous offer for advisors to travel And I know that some chapters have taken advantage of that. I'm looking at you, Rick, and whatnot. So I know that just if you avail yourself to these different opportunities, because we are somewhat virtual still, you're getting to take advantage of what chapters are doing all over the country. And through that, you may find a new supplier partner that's ready to get the word out. I know Margaritaville at Sea is very anxious to work very closely with the advisor community, and they are one of, if not the newest, ASTA supplier partner.
Absolutely. And I think that, let's see, you can put that, Sarah put in the chat, like that was a great meeting and they really appreciated the invitation. So I would say attending other chapter meeting trade shows, like that is amazing, and you should do as much of that as possible. All right, so I want to keep to time. So I want to thank all of my panelists and Rick, who jumped on kind of as a panelist, for contributing to this conversation. Thank you everyone for participating in the chat and sharing all your ideas. And I hope to be in attendance and to see more chapter trade shows coming up soon. There she is.
Hi, everybody.
So this woman uses no introduction, but I'm going to do one anyway. Elizabeth is our Vice President of Finance, and she has been really my closest confidant in trying to make sure that the financials of the chapters are going as smoothly as we can right now. I have a standing meeting with Elizabeth. This was actually Elizabeth's idea to make sure that we were on the same page. Elizabeth has also been very gracious in helping me to understand some of the importance of chapter accounts and finances, and she's helped me understand some of the taxes that go into different things. So I'll stop ranting about Elizabeth and let her take over the next presentation, which is hers. So go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Jasmine. You made accounting sound very exciting, so thanks for that. I appreciate it. This is usually the part of the show where everybody goes and, takes a break or a nap or, finds something else more exciting to do. So I appreciate everyone joining us today, because I do know that the bank accounts have been a needling kind of problem for some time, and COVID did not help any of us with the bank situation at all. So let me start. I'll get my screen up here so that you can all see the lovely, colorful slideshow that I've got for us. If everyone can see, Jasmine, yep, great, okay. So let's get started. Bank accounts. There's a definite benefit to having a bank account. It's a benefit for ASTA National, which is what I'll refer to the HQ organization, the chapters themselves, and as well for you, the officers. Some of the benefits are here on the screen. It reduces potential tax liability to you, the officers. It's very important that the monies that belong to ASTA not get commingled in your business account, or God forbid your personal accounts. You don't want that. You don't want that for you. And it protects ASTA as well. Having a bank account also helps to reduce the threats of fraudulent activity, especially when we require that the chapters have multiple people sign disbursements out of their account. So we require that there are 2 signatories on your checks in order to make a disbursement out. These days, you may also be making disbursements out by wire or by ACH from your account. You're going to want to have a process where you have 2 of your officers signing off on the authorization to move monies out of your account. And finally, it allows greater flexibility for your vendors and your suppliers or your members, if you're charging them dues, to be able to pay into you. Okay, so the bank's perspective. When you go into a bank these days, it's highly unlikely that you have a personal relationship with that bank. That may be because ASTA has chosen a bank that you've never done business with. It may also be because the bank itself has had such high turnover in its managers and staff that they're not going to know you either. An ASTA chapter could have an account since, 2014 with Wells Fargo, but if the staff at the bank has changed, as well as the officers within the chapter have changed, nobody's going to know one another. So from the bank's perspective, they need to establish 4 basic things in order to be able to have a relationship that could lead to a bank account. These are: who's the legal entity wishing to open the account? Does the legal entity have the authority to open the account? How does that legal entity authorize people to act on its behalf? And finally, it needs to confirm that the people who have come in to do this are actually who they represent themselves to be. Generally, since you are new to the bank or the bank manager is new to you, this is all going to have to be done in person. They're going to need to see you, get IDs from you. Nowadays, you also have to sign electronic keypads that are in the bank. Occasionally, and hopefully, you can work with your bank to establish a relationship so that they might be able to relax some of the in-person requirements. But that is a long-term plan that you would have to try to execute with the personal manager that you see at the bank that you go into. Okay, so how is the bank going to assess this situation based on what I had said on the previous slide? And what I want to draw your attention to is that there's actually, when you walk into the bank, there's actually 3 different parts that are walking into the bank. There's ASTA National. ASTA National is the corporate entity that provides the chapters to even exist. So ASTA National as an organization is one part of this relationship. The chapter that you represent is another part of this relationship. And then of course you as a person, you are there as a chapter officer. And when the bank is looking at you, the first line there under the titles talks about the kind of entity that legally each of these is. So you can see that ASTA National is an incorporated entity. It even says it in the title, American Society of Travel Advisors, Inc. That Inc. means that you're incorporated. And it's very important that when you look at the chapter title, the chapters are not incorporated. They are unincorporated legal entities. And finally, you as an officer, you're there in a fiduciary capacity. You're not there as yourself. You're there as an officer who has certain financial requirements and stipulations on you to act on behalf of the chapter and its finances. The second line there says that both ASTA National and the chapters are exempt from federal and state taxes, which is nice to know, both for you and when you go to educate your banker. However, both of these organizations are liable for state sales taxes. So you will pay state sales tax when you reserve that hotel room to have your trade show, or when you buy supplies to put into the trade show or use in your office. You will pay state sales tax for that. Obviously, that is not a condition that rebounds on you, the officer. Each of these organizations is recognized by a unique identifier, and that is what EIN means. EIN is the employer tax ID number. So ASTA National has one, and the chapters have their own unique EIN numbers. It's very important that you do not apply the wrong EIN number to the wrong chapter. These are legal entities, and this is how it drives taxes, bank accounts. When you sign up with a merchant services like National Transaction Code to do credit card transactions or PayPal, those EIN numbers are your fingerprint, if you will, and it has to be correct each and every time. Finally, you as an officer, your unique identifier is your SSN, your social security number. Okay. When the bank is looking to determine how you are authorized to open an account, that's when the articles of incorporation, the chapter bylaws come into play. Those documents actually spell out the fact that you have the authority to do this. And, you know, kind of the equivalent for you, the person, is your authority to verify who you are is your driver's license plus a second form of ID. Typically, that's what the bank is going to ask for. And finally, the document called a certificate of good standing, you can see that it only applies to the national organization and that the chapter organizations don't have that. The reason being that the national organization has a state setup, and while each of the chapters you are in a state, we do not recommend that the chapters require a state setup within their particular state. So like, you don't have a business license from the state of New Jersey or the state of California in most instances. We'll get into why a bank might want such a thing, but in general, we try not to complicate the chapter setups by adding in a layer of state setup. Okay, so as I mentioned, banks aren't going to know you personally, either because they've never met you, you've never worked in that bank, or their employees have had such turnover, especially in light of COVID, that you are going to have to take the role of educating most bank employees on what is required to set up a bank account for you, a chapter. What's most important for you to remember is that you're not alone in this. You can lean on ASTA here, myself for the financial stuff, Peter for some of the more technical legal documents. Jasmine should always be included in all these discussions because we can help provide the templates that you need for your specific situation. And as we talked about the trade shows, this process takes a lot longer than you think, so you're going to have to plan ahead. And this puts a pinch point around the bank accounts, because when you assumed your officer roles in August after the last election, one of the things that you were charged with is to quickly and expeditiously get the signers on your chapter's existing checking account to be changed quickly. You not only have to add yourself so that you can transact the business of the chapter, but you have to withdraw the signatory authority of the prior chapter officers. And we have to have that done quickly because obviously the business of the chapter needs to proceed. And in August, at the end of August, if you initiate it with your bank, then it may take until October, even November, to get the right forms in the right order, get everybody together, and get them into a bank, which, you know, may only be operating on an appointment basis during this period. So you do have to plan ahead, and again, lean on us at ASTA HQ, Jasmine, myself, and Peter to help get you the documents and streamline this as much as possible. Okay, next, a couple things you should know as a chapter officer about having financial responsibility for your chapter. The first thing is that ASTA National HQ, we own the money for the chapter. The chapter does not exist unless it exists under ASTA. And therefore, the chapter always reverts back to ASTA National. And this helps to protect the members who may have contributed money into the chapter should the chapter go defunct, or the chapter have no one step forward to be in an officer position for some reason for some period of time, or even illness would take an officer or a set of officers out of the picture for a period of time. ASTA National then comes in and is able to continue the work and owns, you know, the money and the financial responsibility. Number two, as has been stated for other reasons, chapter president and treasurer will timely submit the June and year-end December financial packages. We've said this many times, so there's nothing new in this one. And finally, the chapter president and treasurer will maintain and pass on to the next officer class all the organization documents. I've only been here at ASTA 2 years. Some of you have been with ASTA decades. A lot of times, one of the most basic documents we need is the EIN notice from the IRS that originally opened up your chapter. And I am sad to say that I cannot find it in the ASTA National headquarter files. It's always ASTA National who is opening up and getting your chapter and EIN number. So it should be here, but I'm sorry to say that over the years, for God knows whatever reasons, I can't find all of them. So it's really important that when we do open up these new chapters and we send you a copy of this IRS notice, that you make that document a formal document that then gets passed along to the next group and the next group as they come in, so that you guys always have your own chapter's documents. Of course, we at HQ, we want to have copies of those. We are keeping copies of those, and together we should be able to back each other up, but it is a system that needs constant attention and work to make sure that we're not losing these very important documents that help to secure your identity and your authority to go in and change signatories or to open a new account. Okay. Okay, so you want to get a bank account, but what kind of a bank account should you have? And this information that I'm going to present now is very different from the banking account information that has been shared previously or stipulated previously to chapters. So I want everyone who is a longtime ASTA chapter officer to suspend what you have heard in the past. We do want you to have bank accounts, but as Jasmine and I took time and effort to look at the kinds of bank accounts that most everyone had was a checking account, the fees on those checking accounts can range anywhere from $25 to $36 a month. And it became very apparent that there are some of our chapters who would eat up, 50% of their money if they had to have a checking account. So we're presenting now the option to do also a small business savings account so that we can cut down on the costs to the chapter and not eat up all of the funds in maintaining an account. And so on the left, you can see that a small business checking account is going to have the higher fees. Typically, it's $25 to $36 a month. The banks usually also require a higher daily balance to even open or maintain a checking account. It usually is around $1,000. It could be a little bit lower, could be a lot higher on some checking account products that banks offer, premium checking account, for instance. You don't need to go to the premium level. Obviously, when you have a checking account, you can write checks. And of course, you have in-person as well as online accessibility to a checking account. What you might not know is that for a small business account, a savings account for a small business, you can also write checks on small business savings accounts. And this is very helpful because it helps you to be able to get into a lower cost bank account situation than you might have thought of before. Typically on a savings account, you're talking about a $5 to $10 a month cost. Typically on a savings account, the balance that you have to maintain is much smaller, in the $300 range, maybe $500 range. The check writing ability, if you didn't know that you could do that, that might open up a whole new discussion for your chapter. And of course, once the account is established, you can have in-person as well as online access to it. Okay, how to decide which option is better for you. I'm a finance person, I'm an accounting person. I want it to be the least costly option that I can do for my chapter. And so I've given you some ranges, some guidance as to what would make the choice between doing a checking account versus doing a savings. If you've got annual income coming into your chapter around $5,000 or more, it will definitely make sense for you guys to have a traditional business checking account and pay that $25 to $36 a month fee, because your annual cost, as indicated in the bottom line there, your annual cost of $300 to $432 is only about 6 to 9% of your $5,000. And so 6 to 9% is a reasonable expense to have a business account that will protect you and the chapter from liability and fraud. But if you have a chapter that historically or in light of COVID has not had very high revenue and you only have about 1,000 to about $499, as a range, you're probably going to want to look at doing a savings account with your bank instead, because in order to get that annual cost down into a reasonable range, a savings account is going to be the way to do it. You're going to be in a 6 to 12% range of cost. 12% is definitely on the higher end. We want to do what we can to bring it down. But the way to do that is to increase the revenue, to increase the amount of suppliers who pay in to the chapter to present their products. That is the way to help reduce the cost between a savings and a checking account. One of the things to keep in mind when choosing between a checking and a savings account is to look at how many transactions a month you have, because oftentimes in the fine print of these products that the banks sell, they will give you a maximum number of transactions that you can process in a month in order to stay in that $5 to $10 a month range or the $25 to $36 a month range. They penalize you if you have greater than that number of transactions. So you're going to have to take a look at your chapter and see, what kind of volume of activity you've had in the past. But more importantly, you're going to want to think about the volume of activity you're striving to have as you re-engage your suppliers, as you re-engage your chapter, as you look to the future to build a more vibrant chapter in your area. And so you're going to want to take that into account. In all honesty, you might start with a savings account for year 2022, maybe year 2023, but maybe through your efforts and the growth of the business for the chapter and the growth in and return in travel itself, by year 2024, you might be moving to a checking account because your chapter will be a more robust, vibrant chapter than it is today. Okay, so what does it take to actually open a bank account? This is the general set of documents and things you're going to have to answer to the bank's satisfaction to be able to open an account. We have several different banks, national banks that we work with, and each of them will have their own flavor of this because banks being highly regulated by the federal government entities, they have standards they have to meet, but then within those standards, they want to promote their own bank brand. They want to be able to promote their own bank products. So they tinker a little bit with everything. But in general, if you look at the left set of columns, the bank wants to know who is the business that's coming in. And you as the ASTA chapter, you're going to provide your IRS EIN notice that names the chapter on it, and you're going to provide your chapter bylaws. This tells the bank who you are from a legal entity perspective, and then it lays out why it is that you guys can come in and ask for a business account. The bank wants to know on the left side, what authority do you have to open an account? For that, ASTA has an HQ provided template for meeting minutes. And this is what is going to give the bank the security that they need in order to know who is coming in and who is going to own this account. And so for right now, I want to show you the template as it stands today. And it got closed on my account. Okay, all right. Well, that was not planned. Let me find it here and I'll open it for us in a second. Okay, here we go. I have a new form in front. Jasmine, can you see that form for me? Thank you, Jasmine. So this is the template. The template's not completed. Everywhere that you see blue ink is what you, the chapter, would need to modify by changing it and then converting it to black ink in order to make it fit the circumstances of your chapter. But generally, this is a very different meeting minutes form than what Jasmine was referring to when you guys have your monthly meetings or your quarterly meetings. Those meeting minutes are very informal, but you can see here that this meeting minutes has to be signed. This meeting minutes needs to have a quorum, a number of people from the chapter in attendance who participate in the creation of this document. The bank then wants to know exactly what authority was given by the chapter at the meeting. So we have you know, that the business purpose is to open up a checking account, or it's the business purpose is to open a savings account, or when you already have an account, the purpose is to change the signatories on the account. So you name that. If you already have an existing account, you put the name of the bank here and the account number. If you're going to a bank for a first time, you're going to put the bank name here as well. You're going to identify who the current officers, that is you. You are the current officers. You want to be added as signatories. Typically, there are 2 of the current officers who were added. But if you need a third, we can add lines, not a problem. ASTA HQ also has to be a signatory on every chapter account. In most instances, that's going to be me. Peter can also be a signatory. Peter is a signatory on some of the existing accounts. Greg Davis can be a signatory, and he is a signatory on existing accounts. So we'll have to know when we talk to you about changing your signatories, you'll have to help us with who is the ASTA HQ person who's already on your account if one already exists. And then finally, there's a form of this that would also include another section here where we would remove any prior officers from signatory authority. So there's a couple of different versions of this template, depending again on what your situation is and how we need to address it. As I said, the meeting minutes have to be signed. You have to, you know, approve it unanimously. These are all things that the bank's going to want to see in order to get that security that they need to provide you guys a bank account with them. Okay, and so we just addressed these last 2 lines. The signatories, there are 2 sets. There's you, the coming in officers who need to be added, but there might also be older officers who have to be removed. And then ASTA HQ is key account executive. That provides in the template as well. Okay. Okay. Let's see, what did I do here? Opening a bank account. Okay, changing. Okay, here we go. All right, next thing. I mentioned how right now banks, there is no national bank that exists in all 50 states. Doesn't exist. Wells Fargo is by far the bank that has the largest footprint in the US, and it has the greatest number of branches within the 38 states that it operates in. But there's no bank that's going to have all 50. And therefore we have, you know, identified Wells Fargo, Bank of America, PNC Bank, and Truist, which used to be known as SunTrust, and has acquired certain other little regional banks under it, the Truist name. But the Truist name is just now coming out into the marketplace, so you might not be familiar with it. If you think SunTrust, you've got the right bank. We went with national banks because of our requirement that not only does the chapter have to be able to sign on the account, but ASTA HQ needs to sign on the account. And only by going with the national bank can Peter or Greg or I go to a local branch here in Virginia and actually sign also onto your account once you guys open it up. So these are the banks we currently recommend that you work with to set up a new account. Most of the existing chapters that I've worked with in the 2 years I've been here have been chapters that have Wells Fargo bank accounts already opened. And These banks are the ones that are going to have this kind of rigorous in-person requirement in order to open an account for all of us. So that is my presentation on banks, bank accounts, and the documents and effort that is needed to get these things opened, maintained, and updated on a timely basis. And so now I want to open up the floor to questions. So
there are quite a few questions in the chat. I want to kind of make a statement of something that I've learned by working with you, Elizabeth, is, and please feel free to add or correct. What I'm finding with working with you and working with these banks is this presentation would cover things that are very general, but every bank and every bank manager may want something else.
yes.
Or may want something slightly different.
Yes.
And it's just trying to get to that person and getting the right person to understand that who we are, how we operate can be some of the most difficult parts of this, because every big manager, every big branch is going to want mostly, like Elizabeth put it, I love the way you put it, some flavor of this, but maybe in a slightly different form. So one of the questions that we have in the chat is, do savings accounts, or in general, like typically have a debit card that the chapter could access if they choose to go with a savings account?
Yeah, once you have opened and established your authority on the account, you will be able to apply for debit cards as that bank offers them with that product. So yes, you can do that. Yeah.
And then Carol asked, what if you don't have the minimum to start a bank account, even still with that savings account being like kind of at $1,000?
You can apply to ASTA to get an opening loan for your chapter.
All right. Let's see. Michael's quote said, I just pulled out the opening account form from our bank in ASTA, and it has ASTA as a nonprofit corporation. I think I want to make this distinction. ASTA is a nonprofit, but we are a 501c6, not 501c3. A 501c3 is your typical tax-exempt entity that a lot of us think of when we think of nonprofits. And so us being different, and Elizabeth can kind of expand on that, being a 501c6, we are nonprofit, but are not often eligible for that.
Yeah, so yes, ASTA is a nonprofit corporation, but our nonprofit status is narrowly defined. It is not the ones that you think of, like American Red Cross and that kind of a professional association, if you will. And that does give us federal tax, income tax exemption, and it gives us state income tax exemption, but it does not give sales tax exemption. So we all pay sales tax to the state or the city or the region that we operate in.
Yeah, Peter pointed out that we are not a charity, and I think that is an appropriate distinction. And then Rick Artis said that we are a not-for-profit rather than nonprofit, which I also think is a helpful distinction.
That's a good, yeah, I like that.
Maureen asked, can they have both a checking and savings account?
Sure. There are chapters who, because of their robust efforts, they have savings accounts, they have checking accounts, they may even have investment accounts where they have money that they can put into an investment vehicle like a money market or a CD that they don't need to touch for 2 years. And just let it make some interest for them. So all of those are possible. It goes back to the kind of financial robustness that you are able to generate within your chapter.
Yes. there were questions about the template that you presented. It was asked if it was available on the CPC resources page, which it is not. But if you can explain kind of why it's not widely available in that sense.
Yeah, because we need to know which bank you're dealing with. We need to know who's already on. If you have an existing account, who's already on it. If it's going to be opening a new account, we need to know that. And in each of those answers is very specific to each chapter. So you're going to have to reach out to us here to get you the correct template. And we'll kind of pre-populate some of the pieces of it, and then it'll be yours to have a meeting. You can call a meeting virtually with your members to complete it. Obviously, then you have to get it signed, which is not something you can do virtually unless you've got or pay for DocuSign. To do it that way, you're going to probably have to, sign it in person for most instances. We here at ASTA, me or Peter or Greg, whoever the ASTA signatory, HQ signatory is, I'm going to have to sign it also. So after you guys and the chapter sign on all your lines, you PDF it over to me, I sign it, and I PDF it back to you guys, and then you can go into the branch with your IDs and all of you together and get your signatories changed or your account opened.
Yes. There was a question also that says they still refer to the 2019 Treasurer Guidelines for preparing the taxes. There was an updated, the 2021 chapter guidelines have been sent out with my last email about turning in forms and different things like that. So if you need a copy of that email, please just send me an email. It's a rather lengthy email, but it goes over everything that is needed in your financial package. Speaking of which, I'm going to go ahead and plug Elizabeth's breakout session tomorrow because financial packages are going to be due soon. So if you are a chapter treasurer or someone interested in chapter treasury or helping your chapter with their treasury, and you're concerned, curious, would like some tips on specifically the forms that are needed for that packet, please make sure that you are in attendance at Elizabeth's breakout session tomorrow. I want to make sure I'm not, does anyone else have any other questions regarding chapter financials?
Hi, it's Rick. I just wanted to say one issue that we ran into when I became treasurer was because Jack passed away and we lost access to the bank account. PNC Bank would not accept anything not signed in their presence. So Joanne and I had to make an appointment with Greg to go to the DuPont Circle PNC office. And fortunately, the woman took pity on us and took us in without an appointment. But, and this was well before COVID that, so sometimes if it might be good to do it at Ledge Day, if you go in a day early or something and you need to get it done, to find one of the banks that's near ASTA headquarters and do it right then and there in person with everybody.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Rick. ASTA Ledge Day is coming up in June, and that could afford us the opportunity to do it locally with everyone present at one time. The banks, as Rick said, even pre-COVID, doing things in person in order for them to be sure that you are the actor you're saying you are. It's only been exacerbated during COVID. And Wells Fargo, unfortunately, you may recall a couple of years back before COVID, Wells Fargo ran into a problem in that their staff was opening up accounts for people all over the place. And the staff was doing that because Wells Fargo had put into place a bonus for their staff. If they opened so many accounts, they got cash or they got, a Visa card or something. And so the staff went wild and the bank didn't know it. for a very long time, which speaks to the poor controls at the bank. So having had that come out in public, you know, it was 2017 or 2018, something like that, that is very fresh in the federal bank regulators' minds. And all of the banks are aware of that. And none of the banks wants to be on the front page of the paper or on, you know, 60 Minutes for these kinds of abuses. So the banks are feeling a very intense scrutiny on them, and they have, you know, tightened up their procedures as well for that reason, as for the fact that, you know, COVID. So.
And that was the issue also when we were looking at switching from PNC to Wells, they wouldn't offer. And then also was the name change from agents to advisors. So the paperwork didn't match. So we just stuck with PNC. So we didn't have to go through it again.
Yeah, we do run into those problems. As a chapter, you may want to style your chapter as the Greater Delaware chapter, and I'm just picking on Delaware for a moment. But the IRS EIN number, that's your real name, and the bank is going to want to set up the account based on what your IRS EIN number is. And for chapters who've existed in the pre-NACTA-ASTA merger period, a lot of those chapters still say, you know, Greater Atlantic or Greater Atlanta NACTA chapter. We can help try to get the bank to change those things, but as Rick points out, sometimes it's better to forego those kinds of issues with the bank. And instead, when you deal with your suppliers, when you advertise your chapter, you can advertise it with a slightly different name. And that's going to be fine, but the legal entity name is really going to have to be the one that carries across your bank accounts as well as the tax returns. So, but reach out to us, because sometimes we have success with getting it changed, because I can download 3 years of your tax returns from the IRS website, and it always says advisors for the last 3 years, and the bank will say, oh, okay, advisors, we'll change that. You know, so, you know, we sometimes succeed, but it's not a sure thing.
Also why we didn't change our name when we absorbed Hudson Valley and upstate New York. Yeah. Because, you know, our tax ID number goes back to 1936.
Precisely. And once you're known as that, it can be impossible to get to change. And certainly when the bank employees are very young and new to their job, they're not necessarily going to understand the nuances of what is possible. So we fight the battles that we can win, and we leave the ones that we can't. So. I like Wendy's comment. Yes,
yeah.
we do move on faster than we can change our shoes. Agreed.
Absolutely. Any other questions about finances? Keep in mind that Elizabeth will have a breakout session tomorrow during our breakout session.
Yep. I want to thank everybody for their patience when it comes to these bank accounts. The chapters are a very important part of my job. And as Jasmine stated, I have got a weekly meeting with Jasmine every Wednesday where we keep in touch, and she helps to keep me on track when when an email has fallen off of my 942 inbox count of the moment. She helps to bring me back to the things and keep on top of them. Eddie Woodham is also a great resource for me, because he comes back to me and he says, you know, my chapter Amy, she needs to have this, you know, I told her to be patient, but is it on your radar? And I'm like, oh, Eddie, thank God you reminded me, because, you know, it dropped off the radar. So I appreciate everyone's patience as we move forward to make the chapter support from ASTA HQ more robust and more consistent. But I appreciate also the gentle nudges that I get from Jasmine and Eddie and the other directors, because I need those sometimes. So thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. This is, I think Joanne said it perfectly. She said, you spoke in a clear language, understandable by those of us who are not in the exciting world of accounting. Which, yes, I'm not in the exciting world of accounting, only by proxy. So Elizabeth has helped me to understand this as well.
Well,
so,
yeah,
we're coming.
It's all about getting stuff done. So we'll find the language that resonates with people, and you know, we'll make it happen.
Yes, and Edward wants to call you after
Sure.
this, Elizabeth. I think he has
Sure.
some one question. So, so we're coming to the end of our time together. It looks like we have, I started 10 minutes late. That's my fault. I'll fix it for tomorrow. But it looks like we're going to end about 10 minutes early. Elizabeth, if you wouldn't mind adding your email and contact information to the chat. And while Elizabeth's doing that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I think this is where we are. There we go. And so we have talked about overcoming our banking challenges together. And I would say the next thing, if you are watching this and you would like to receive credit for watching this video, the last part of the phrase is that they are Isaac's favorite. We were talking about some baby elephants. And so there are 3 parts to this phrase, just send me the phrase so that you can receive full credit for watching this meeting. And with that, I will say this. So we're going to go ahead and wrap for today. I'm going to go over, I'm going to go over a little bit what's going to happen tomorrow for session 2 of our meeting. So we will be meeting, we're going to start at the same time. Well, we're going to start on time. And we're going to start off our discussion about just an overview of operating a stable chapter within the pandemic. We're going to try to have a little bit more open discussion about that. Oh, please email me the phrase, like to my email at jcausey@asta.org. Yes, if you are currently watching, all you need to do is put your name, your chapter's name, and your position within the chapter to receive credit for attending this meeting. For those who will be watching virtually later, and who can rewind and fast forward, they need to have the 3 parts of the phrase to make sure that they got all of the meeting. So those of you who want to send me the phrase, you're more than welcome. So if you haven't had a chance to kind of check in, make sure you check in. So your name, your chapter's name, and then your position within the chapter, if applicable. If you're just an amazing chapter member, you know, wanting to be an officer, checking this out, then that's awesome too.
Excuse me, Jasmine. So this is just in case we didn't log in the chat line, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
So if you're listening to me now, please just check in through the chat. If you're listening later, please send the phrase. All right. Perfect. I see some people adding their messages. Awesome.
We haven't
so
gotten Elizabeth's email yet.
Okay. Elizabeth's email. There we go. Oh, well, Elizabeth's email and my email is our first initial full last name @asta.org. So she's ahenry@asta.org. And I'm Jay Causey at ASTA.org.
Thank you.
Checking in. All right, awesome. There you go. She just put it in the chat for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so tomorrow we're going to start off with an open discussion about operating a stable chapter in a pandemic. A little bit of encouragement, also just to talk through some things that you may be going through and to talk with your chapter. After that session, we're going to have a chapter on legal guidance, a session workshop on legal guidance for your chapter with Pete Lovato. Stay tuned for that one. Then we're going to have a break, and then we're going to have 3 breakout sessions running concurrently. So I'm going to host a breakout session. I'm going to start, it's going to be Real Magnet 201. So like I said in my email about this meeting, make sure you view my 3 Real Magnet training videos so that we can start from that point. Christina is going to be hosting a breakout session about building your chapter's legacy, specifically focusing on engagement and retention of good chapter members,
Hey, Elizabeth,
as well
Edward
as
from the New York City SBN chapter. Can you give me a call?
So Christina is going to be hosting a workshop on retaining your chapter members, also focusing on retaining good chapter officers and how to build that legacy. And last but certainly not least, Elizabeth is going to be hosting her breakout session, and it's going to focus a lot on what you all need to turn in as far as chapter. So that one's going to be one that's very much so for your chapter treasurer or chapter treasurer type entities. And those will be running concurrently. So you pick one and go, and then the others will also be recorded, so you don't have to worry about that if you want to view those later. Any questions before we adjourn for the day? Okay. Sorry, now the sun's in my eye, like the sun's starting to set here in the office. So I apologize for the lighting. It's golden out here.
You look
Nice.
lovely. You look lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. And so with that, I am going to add Eddie Woodham to the spotlight, if you would. And Eddie, if you could officially adjourn us until tomorrow.
I will happily do that. Again, I think we've had a great 4 hours, starting off with that great announcement for the package that was approved unanimously by our board of directors for chapter presidents and leadership. So we'll see you all tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And thanks for taking time to be with us today. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.